Hello and welcome to Tax Matters. I am Chiamaka Ohaochi. The last episode of Tax Matters centered around two issues that have defined tax administration in Nigeria in the year 2021. One is the Finance Act 2020 and the other is the end-to-end tax administration solution, the FIRS TaxPro-MAX. With regard to the Finance Act 2020, we decided to do a media review to find out from the perspectives of a major group of stakeholders, tax consultants, how the Act has impacted tax administration in Nigeria in general and, in particular, the businesses of their clients and, of course, their own practice. We also sought to know from the consultants how TaxPro-MAX has impacted tax administration since its introduction. Due to the limitations of time, we only have 25 minutes to do this week after week. We pushed that part to today, and that is what we're gonna do. We have since reached out to more tax consultants and they would be part of the menu today. We will also share with you an interview with Mrs. Chiaka Ben Obi, the group lead digital support group at the FIRS, in which she responds to the concerns of the tax practitioners. But first, the consultants. Mr. Michael Ango is a partner in the Tax Advisory and Regulatory Services Group at Anderson in Nigeria. We'd like to know if you have embraced the TaxPro-MAX in filing for your clients, and also if you know or if you're aware if your clients have also embraced the TaxPro-MAX. Please share with us your experiences.
Well, asking me if I've embraced TaxPro-MAX is just like asking a patient if he has taken his medication. TaxPro-MAX is a solution that is long overdue. And let me give you a bit of a history to TaxPro-MAX. As you're aware, I used to work at the FIRS, and over the years, I think right from about 2008, when the FIRS Establishment Act was introduced, there's always been the idea that we needed to automate the core tax administration functions in Nigeria. So things like tax filings, tax assessments, payment, processing, even debt management and enforcement and all of this. Now the unique thing about TaxPro-MAX is that TaxPro-MAX was a solution that was wholly developed in-house by the FIRS, and for that I must commend them sincerely. Now TaxPro-MAX essentially what it tries to do, or what it has set out to do, is to provide an end-to-end solution for taxpayers. So from registration to filing of your returns, uploading of your documents, assessment and payment. Having said that, there are some challenges with TaxPro-MAX. I think one of the major issues, and this is the feedback from taxpayers with TaxPro-MAX, is there wasn't a significant pilot period. So I think the feedback is that probably FIRS should have given a longer pilot period, which is to say if FIRS wanted to introduce it in June and have June as the cutoff date, they might have started the pilot in January. Maybe give 6 months, people would get acclimatized with, with the usage of the TaxPro-MAX. The second issue is in terms of functionality. So sometimes when you're on TaxPro-MAX, you will then discover that the portal hangs or it can log you out, while you're inputting certain data. And then if you haven't saved that data, you've lost it, you have to go back and start all over again. So that's one feedback we have received. And because we are also users of TaxPro-MAX, we've experienced this severally. Another issue with TaxPro-MAX is in terms of the forms themselves. Of course, in our interaction with FIRS, what they've said to us, look, listen, all we did was to take the hard copy forms and automate them. And so when you're complaining about volume of information and all of that, it's nothing different from what was in the old company income tax or VAT forms. But what we have said to them is that the whole idea of automation is to make life simpler and easier for the taxpayer. So if there is a way to kind of amend those forms to make them simpler, of course, as consultants, we always want to be consulted and to be used to fill out the forms. But we also realize that there may be companies that want to do these things themselves. And so it must be a way that you don't need to be a chartered accountant, you don't need to be a tax practitioner, as it were. If you have basic literacy, computer literacy, you should be able to use the system, just like filling out your visa forms and all of that. So that's one of the concerns, that I think they need to simplify the forms. Then there are a few technical issues here when it comes to things like computation of capital allowances. So I think what TaxPro-MAX does is, once you upload or once you impute the cost of an asset, it begins to compute the capital allowances as though it's a new asset. So that particular issue comes from assets that have previously been in use. So it kind of takes the asset as a new asset, and then the capital allowance is computed as though it were a new asset. I think these are some of the functionalities that FIRS needs to address, things like balancing charge and all of that. Another issue which I only became aware of today, is that for non-resident companies, okay, you can only generate a document identity number in Naira. And I mean, a non-resident company cannot pay tax in Naira from offshore. But to be honest, it's a very useful tool. I don't have to go to the tax office to process a tax clearance certificate. I don't have to go to the tax office to, get an assessment for myself. Whatever is online, I file it online. I go to the bank, I pay, and then it's uploaded, and then I sit in my office and my work is done.
Dr. Emekinwa Bozo is one of the newly elected members of the Council of the CITN. Have you embraced the TaxPro-MAX in filing for your clients, or do your clients, have they embraced this TaxPro-MAX?
I have filed virtually all the clients I have on TaxPro-MAX. Some of my clients have basically have to work in line with what they have seen. And some of them even, we have to bring them in and train them. They are filing their VATs by themselves. It's just only the annual returns we have, taken upon ourselves to do because of the technicalities involved, so that they don't make mistakes in their filing. But it's a welcome development, though there are still areas of improvement, which like the aspect of the capital allowance, the aspect of the withholding taxes carried forward. All those things are still angle that I believe that with time, FIRS will be able to perfect the system.
Have you embraced this TaxPro-MAX in filing for your clients, or do you know if your clients have embraced the TaxPro-MAX?
You don't have an option than to embrace it, because there's really no option, left to the taxpayers or their consultants, their tax consultants, in filing returns with the Federal Inland Revenue Service. So what are the features of this TaxPro-MAX? Some of the features are: one, the online submission of tax returns. You have the processing of the electronic tax clearance certificate, validation of tax identification number. Then it has automatic imposition of late filing and late remittance penalties and interest. It's automatically computed on the TaxPro-MAX. Then it's supposed to have, though that area is still sketchy, there are automatic allocation of withholding tax credit to taxpayers. But it comes with a whole lot of challenges. Some of the challenges that you see are at the end of the financial year. Right, you have about 6 months for which you have to file the annual returns for your clients, and at the point of that, there are certain items that when you are imputing in there, you have challenges. Under the non-current asset portion of the portal doesn't recognize depreciation for the year, for example. Right? What it does, it recognizes cumulative depreciation. So you need to get the tax officers trying to help you navigate around the portal to be able to do this. And you find out that this shouldn't be so. You understand? Because the process should be a seamless one. Right? Also, when it comes to capital allowance computation, you find out that under the capital allowance computation, we have defined rates for computing capital allowance. So as a tax consultant to a client, you would have computed the capital allowance on the basis of the defined rates. But when you now see the computation that you have on the TaxPro-MAX, the figure that you arrive at most often times is different from the real capital allowance that is being computed. Also, when you want to input your intangibles, right, the TaxPro-MAX doesn't give you a lot of options in recognizing intangibles. Then also, when you talk about loss reliefs and capital allowance brought forward, you cannot do that from the comfort of your office when you have to do that with TaxPro-MAX. Then, there are certain companies that the government grants what we call pioneer status, right? When they grant them pioneer status, it means that, they're exempted from paying company income tax, right? So there are other fees they pay, but they're exempted from paying company income tax. So if you're doing filing for such a company using the TaxPro-MAX, you find out that the TaxPro-MAX computes company income tax liability for such companies, which should not be so.
For Mr. Albert Folorenshaw, it's also not a matter of choice.
TaxPro-MAX, whether I've embraced it, you don't have choice really than to embrace it. And here it was internally developed. It means that from what we have seen so far, it is a very good work in progress. Of course, there are several issues that are still there. Some industries were not fully incorporated into the Pro-MAX. For example, insurance companies, the returns, they have a peculiar tax computation process and format, and so that was not properly captured. Industries were not clearly understood in terms of, for example, power generating companies are into serious manufacturing, okay, using turbine to convert gas into power and then selling to embed before the discos and before we can have light. So that's the major manufacturing sector, but it was not captured as that, and so there are quite a number of issues. Again, if you are a small company, you are not filing returns, like I said earlier. By the time you reach the threshold of 25 million and you want to file your returns on Pro-MAX, it will ask you for prior returns because it does not know, it will ask you where you're coming from. Okay, so I think a lot of that needs to be done, okay, and I believe the FRS is doing a lot. Earlier you mentioned the Finance Act 2019 and whatever, and there are certain things that certain changes. One of those changes is minimum tax computation. You find out that in the Finance Act 2019, you had minimum tax computed at 0.5% of gross turnover less frank investment income. But in 2020, right, that was brought down, it was reduced to 0.25%. But there are certain companies that are exempted from these minimum tax computations. And these are companies that are in their first 4 years of operations. Does TaxPro-MAX make provision for these kind of companies? The answer is a big no. Also, a lot of companies, when they are dealing with vendors and their clients, majorly their clients, there's a certain amount of money that is withheld from the invoices sent to their clients. It's more of like an advance payment of corporation tax, right? And these you can utilize to defray your company income tax liability or the company income tax obligation. But you find out that the TaxPro-MAX doesn't give you the access to view unutilized, withholding tax credit. Now, some of the things again that probably we feel FRS should have done is in introducing this kind of application, right? It should have been done simultaneously with the manual filing, you understand? So with more emphasis on utilization of the TaxPro-MAX to file, and a certain time frame should now be given till all the teething problems that the TaxPro-MAX comes with, is erased and addressed.
giving a deadline for moving from the old system to the old system is too punitive. They should have done it maybe in as we are moving from the old system to this, they should have given a gap of about 3 months so that people can move from it. Then apart from that one, anybody want to file back year assessment now, you have to go and meet them in their office because it's not on that issue. Then apart from that one again, when you now fill their tax update to even file your returns, you won't get return in good time. And without the tax update being updated to give you your password and your email to use, you can't file. And in most cases, they only give one to one individual. So a consultant find it difficult to use his name for about 10 clients. So they can only use one name and one password for one. So immediately the system will not accept you as number to use it for another client again. So in that particular situation, they are making life difficult for we consultants. Then another issue that we are having, this TaxPro-MAX has not given any consideration to a consultant. In the sense that anybody can just input the account on the system, then submit. There is no portion where a consultant will sign. There is no portion that the auditor will even sign the account. Even they may even file account that is not signed now by any auditor, because what we only need is that where is the account? You just input the figure on the platform. Then you now determine your tax liability. Then you now submit for payment. But there is no any portion where a consultant will sign that, look, I, Alhaji Fashion and Co. or Laftax Consultant Limited prepare this document. So there is a need to ensure that the consultant and the auditor's portion is given into the platform.
London, New York or Lagos, business or holiday, home or office, you can now carry out your tax transactions from anywhere in the world. You can now file all your tax returns, pay online, get a receipt and even process your tax clearance certificate from anywhere in the world online and in real time. All you need to do is log on to www.firs.gov.ng and click on e-services and be introduced to the world of innovation, convenience and transparency from the FIRS. You can also pay stamp duty as you register a new company with the CAC or for other transactions that require stamp duty payment online. You can also file your withholding tax returns and determine the withholding tax deducted from you is in government coffers so that you can get your receipt within 45 days as long as the deduction has been remitted. Yes, all of this and more online at www.firs.gov.ng/e-services. FIRS, making tax administration as easy as ABC. Please note that all FIRS services are free of charge. This message is from the Federal Inland Revenue Service. It pays to pay your tax.
We reached out to the FIRS for their response to the concerns raised by the tax advisors. Mrs. Chaka Ben Obi is the group lead digital support group at the FIRS. The interview with Mrs. Ben Obi is a full-length interview on its own, which we can only do justice to by sharing with you in full. That we are going to do, but on this episode, permit us to take that part where she addresses the concerns of the tax practitioners. Mrs. Ben Obi, welcome to Tax Matters.
I thank you very much. And I'm glad to be here.
We are opportune to talk with some tax practitioners, tax consultants, and they raised some concerns with regards to the TaxPro-MAX, and we would like you to address some of these concerns for clarity purpose. Now, they raised some concerns with regards to the fact that the TaxPro-MAX does not give provisions for companies exempted from paying companies income tax while filing. Example, companies that are being granted pioneer status, and also companies that are exempted from paying minimum tax.
Okay, first and foremost, what is even the origin, or what's the motivation behind developing TaxPro-MAX internally? We realized that previously, most of the solutions we've gotten off the rack and implemented with external service providers, there was always one shortcoming, one gap or the other, which were fundamental. Such complaints that were coming from our taxpayers, even from the tax officials, made us to be running what we would call a semi-automated system. And that's not what we wanted. We wanted a full automated system whereby we can start capturing the life cycle of a taxpayer from the day they register as a taxpayer up until the request, because ultimately we want to request for their tax clearance certificate. Over and above that, when they pay for their for the tax liability, they want to be able to issue the receipt. They want to also, for that receipt to be because it's a transaction, well, especially the withholding tax, they want to be issued their credit notes, which they will use to offset their corporate income tax when they file. So that life cycle, there was a need to capture it automatically and even to pay without paying online, without the interference of tax officials. Not only that, if you go to developed economies, that is the way a proper tax administration system should run. Over and above that, what is key is taxpayer making any payment. That payment that the taxpayer is making, what raised what process, which is assessment, before getting to that final figure that you have established a liability for the taxpayer. So that means that for any taxpayer to make a payment, there has to be an assessment. That payment has to be tied to an assessment. One, it makes you confident, it gives you confidence that this assessment that the taxpayer is paying has properly been documented and the taxpayer is paying what they are supposed to pay. As against a system where you have a taxpayer go to the bank, make payments, and then come back, and then you have all manner of, it's such a challenging task to reconcile all of those payments to the assessments that the payments, that resulted to the payments. Now, when it goes to your specific question about not allowing minimum tax for those who are supposed to be granted minimum tax, as well as those that have pioneer status and all that. Both of the challenges and both issues are just on profiling. So it requires a lot of taxpayer education, not just on the side of the taxpayer, but also on administrators. For example, when the taxpayer was registered in the system, how did the tax administrator profile them? That is what we call account officer in the bank. If they profile that company as a pioneer status, certainly it will have that relief when it files their tax. The same thing on the minimum tax. Minimum tax, depending on what they set as a commencement date. When it was manual, a company whose commencement date was probably 10 years ago can't claim that they haven't commenced business. But now it's automated, so you enter your commencement date. If your commencement date you entered is above the time limit for minimum tax, it will of course compute your tax that you're supposed to pay. So it is that profiling, the setting, what date did we put as commencement date so that minimum tax can also be computed. Because it's automatic, the system is not speaking to anyone when it is making those calculations because the rules has been set. So but it is there, it is captured. Many taxpayers who understood this, or many tax administrators who have set the right profile for the taxpayers are not complaining. It's just those whose commencement date had been set wrongly that are experiencing that difficulty. But with more information, our tax officials are knowing what to do.
Thank you very much, Ma. Now, they also raised the concern of the TaxPro-MAX not giving them access to view unutilized withholding tax credit. What can you say about that?
Again, it's a gap in communication because every taxpayer has a credit report. When they log into their profile, they will have access to their credit report. When they open their credit report, they will see the different credit reports that are there. One is the withholding tax credit note, another is the loss relief. They also have VAT, so it is there in their credit reports.
Interesting. Now, they also raised the concern with regards to non-provision of no provision made for insurance companies on the TaxPro-MAX because they have a peculiar filing process.
Okay. Not just the insurance, it's also some specialized sectors like aviation. It's also involved in this particular that we didn't go live with them when we went live with the other sectors. But as at last Monday, I'm glad to tell you that insurance, life and non-life have become operational and they can file.
The full interview with Mrs. Ben Obi will come to you in a subsequent episode. But be rest assured that all the concerns have been taken on board by the FRS. In any case, in matters of this nature, it is work in progress. Thank you for watching. See you next week on this same station, same day of the week, same time of the day. Bye for now.